My name's Kasha. I'm the youth editor here at news.com.au. Today on our news chat panel, I'm joined by Nick, Johan, Rachel, Jasper, and Zara. And today we're going to talk all things election results. I'm going to throw to Zara first because she was in the middle of telling us a really good polling story. So Zara, tell me about your experience at the polling booth.
My community often does receive the odd stereotype, the odd discrimination from anyone that is outside our community. Is a very rich migrant refugee demographic with an Indigenous demographic as well. So it is quite out of the ordinary to often see or experience verbal aggression within the community. And that's something that I definitely did experience this time around. I did experience a bit of verbal aggression from those from specific parties, which I won't mention. But it was definitely quite a bit of a out of ordinary experience. As you know, I mentioned I do come from a very culturally linguistic community, which does center itself around unity and culture and community. So it was quite disappointing. And I think an election to me is all about unity. It's all about creating community. And these values definitely weren't highlighted or amplified within my experience of voting this year.
There was just so much emphasis on, do you know how to vote? And I've heard this from a few other people as well, in the fact that you would walk into the booth and, you would be asked a question if you know how to vote. And even if you said yes, they would run through it again. So I think there was awareness that a lot of young people were coming forward to vote in this election. I think there was such an emphasis on making sure that everybody was really aware on how to actually go into the voting booth and cast your vote correctly.
On to the results. How are you feeling? What sort of reaction did you get from your friends, and what were you sort of seeing on social media in terms of Anthony Albanese and Labor being in and ScoMo being out?
The number of diversity and representation seats that we've seen come through has really made me more than satisfied. It's made me giddy with joy almost. I remember on Saturday I was watching the elections with my brother, and we were looking at the candidates and the entire race, and we were looking at their last names, and every time we'd see someone with a South Asian name or an Asian Australian name, we're like, oh my God, there's actually people representing different communities who were actually putting up quite a lot of fight for even safe seats. And so I think the number of women of color, the number of Asian Australians, Penny Wong is a foreign minister now, so that's made me quite excited.
I was shocked, honestly. That's the emotion that I'm bringing from this, is that I'm shocked, and not shocked in a bad way. I'm shocked in a good way, because it felt like a lot of people's voices were being heard.
A much more diverse parliament, which means that when we have these big issues like climate, like women issues, all these different things, we're actually going to see a kind of spectrum of ideas. And particularly with independents, it's going to be very place-based ideas. I think that has the potential to be really, really powerful for our parliament. I'm quite excited to see how that plays out.
All 6 Teal independent candidates who took safe Liberal seats are women. So not only do we have the diversity within independent seats, but we also have diversity within gender. I think Rachel really does draw a very important point in terms of suggesting that we're not necessarily having an echo chamber in Parliament. So I think the diversity of views, not only in seats and parties, but also in gender, is absolutely going to be fundamental and transformative in shaping what Australia looks like over the next couple of years. So for me personally, I'm so excited.
I think just to add to Rachel and Zara's point, I think obviously we all know that, from the election outcome, we knew that change was needed, but it's now the work's only getting started, really. When we talk about accountability, when we talk about taking self-responsibility, there's discussions over the Federal Integrity Commission, for instance, and holding politicians accountable, their decisions, what they do with the money that they have. Again, I think it's the role of advocates now. It's the role of, organizations now not to take a step back and say, we've made the change. That's it. It's done. But it's now to say, okay, there is change now. We've been vying for that change, but it's now about, taking the stand to say, okay, you've said all these things. Let's put them into actions.
What other changes are we really hoping that people will stick to and will happen now?
the reason that like so many people voted was definitely just for the change in the climate area. There's been no action whatsoever in moving towards doing anything about climate change. The Morrison government said didn't even like make a actual like proper like pledge for climate change. It was all rather just like words floating in the air. Lots of call outs by other countries, international stage on climate change. We were basically a laughing stock, and this is us saying no, we want this now.
Yeah, as Nick said, climate change is a really big one. There hasn't really been that much put in, and as the years go by, it's very evident that it's only going to become a bigger issue. Childcare policies for Labor, increasing the subsidies, that was another really big reason that I think they got in. I think that was pretty important for them to address and continue and pledge to continue increasing those further.
I'm a firm believer that the result of this election is predominantly shaped by Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins. So I think I do want to touch on gender equality and the lack thereof of policies supporting women's safety. The Labor government has promised to establish a new family, domestic, and sexual violence commissioner to oversee policies for victim survivors. I also do want to highlight that I think that there must be an intersectional policy adopted in terms of supporting such a commissioner. It is important to highlight that migrant and refugee women, First Nations women, LGBTQI communities disproportionately face gender based violence a lot more than other demographics. So ensuring that there is an intersectional policy adopted within women's safety and the policies that connect to women's safety is a fundamental policy that I'm hoping that the Albanese government does push for.
I'm just hoping that no one gets left behind here.